The tricky thing about this whole space is that it's still kind of mysterious in the Wild West. I mean, what's interesting is when we look at the social science spaces, like all the scientists that I work with and do that deep collaborative work, the social science is clear. We know good ways to relate together. We know what a healthy conversation is. We know how rapport works. We know positive and negative ratios. Emotional safety is this term that I used to describe the machine space because there's safety, there's cultural safety, there are these other kind of spaces where it's like they know they need to take care of these things. And emotional safety is a space that folks haven't really known how to look after that. We've had a lot of kind of bad, and I say bad, just inefficient, ineffective, insufficient, kind of ways at trying to understand how people are doing. But I think when we look at the space of AI, or when we look at new tools that people are kind of integrating into their businesses and the way that they do their work, the main thing we're looking at is how is that person doing? How are they doing in the conversation? How were they when they came in? How are they when they're leaving? What were the turns in the conversation? What is going on for them in their experience? And that's something that specifically I'll talk about, like ChatGPT or the language models, because that's my most recent experience with really diving deep into emotional safety. Is you can tell a bit of what's going on because the language is there, and language is really loaded with emotion. It's just implicit in it. And you can tell because it's mapped. You can tell conversation. It's like this really long, text chat. You can tell who's doing what and where the turns in the conversation are. And is the human moving from a place that was unintentional? Are they starting in one place and ending up somewhere, what I call emotional drift, based off of the concept of machine drift, where like you may end up watching one YouTube video and then like an hour later you're something else, or Amazon, you're gonna buy something and then all of a sudden you're getting, it's like, are we drifting? Are we going to places that were not our clear intention? And I think for businesses, what's cool is because the social science has developed, we know how these things work for people and what's healthy. We just need to apply that over to these spaces. And it's this really interesting challenge of the moment, which is, are we willing to look at the ways that we are with each other? Because whether it's like our relationships at home or our friends and community, it's hard to look at our stuff. It's hard to check in and know how we're doing. This is like hard stuff for us as humans. And that's kind of the challenge of technology now, is we're no longer like in the place we were in, like I'll date myself now, where it's like, I don't know how to program the VCR or how to make the mini disc thing work or what to get these songs onto the iPod. Whatever it is, that's like really long ago. But I feel like we're not in that place where the technology is the challenge. We're running up against our human stuff. Where are our limitations? What's hard for us to do? It's easier to just have a chat and not have to check in. But when we look at the wholeness of someone's experience, we have to really look at it honestly and clearly and with discernment of, how is this serving people? And we're deeply devoted to being in good service of people. So it requires a little extra work at the outset, but I think this next wave of technology can be super supportive of us if we just do that. For so many of the more complex things that we engage with, especially because brands extend a product into the world that they live in and the emotional spaces that they dwell in inside of us and the way that we live our lives. They participate in kind of the ethers of our being in a way that can be really empowering or can be kind of debilitating or disempowering. So I think what's really courageous and awesome for brands to do in the well-being space is to say, we're actually really interested in this whole person. We're interested in the parts of their life that are pretty. We're interested in the parts that aren't. We're interested in all of who they are, and we're interested in everybody. So we're not just interested in the people that serve our purposes or that serve our bottom line. We're actually interested in the whole. And I think if you treat almost like metonymically, you look at like the part represents the whole. If you look at the person as, well, we may see these parts because they're the shiny parts, but what about everything else going on with that person? We're going to choose to care about that and prioritize that. How do we do that? How do we have longer conversations with people? How do we have community conversations? How do we step up and really make space for the whole? And then I think when you look at the part of the person or the part of the community and you start looking at it that way, there's a well-being and the understanding of well-being too, when we look at it as a kind of ecology almost, is how are we taking care of, it's like taking care of the bees in the soil because that's what's best for the farmer's trees. It's like, how are you taking care of the things that contribute to the greater well-being? And I think it's easy for businesses or brands to say, well, this is my lane, this is my responsibility, this is my bottom line. And it's better to say, how can I take a bigger view? And I think there's examples in business of this over time, but it's like really those pathfinders. Like I think of Yvon Chouinard and his work, where he's an incredible example, because I remember the Patagonia ad with the shirt that was said, don't buy this jacket or don't buy this shirt. And the idea was, we want you to buy one thing and wear it until you can't send it back to us to sew or fix, or you are not going to duct tape it anymore. We want this thing to fall apart. Don't buy more stuff. And then I love what he did with his family foundation recently, which he said, we are going to make a dent in climate change. I don't need my kids to be these wealthy heirs that have this generational wealth. I actually believe that the wealth belongs with the planet. And so all of his good being redirected to the thing that inspired him to start that company in the first place. I just feel like that kind of vision and alignment and reciprocity is a kind of walking purpose and values that is rare. Not super rare. The examples are there are like him, he's a radical, but there are many folks that do incredible work like that. And it's like, so that's one example. And maybe it can't be that radical. It's very complex in business. But at the same time, there are ways that you can walk that kind of path with a greater alignment. And I think that's not just down to the CEO and the execs. It's down to every person in every job to just shore themselves up a bit more with what they believe in. And that's something I know is hard because I've done it, but you can.